All right, Mark, thank you. I'm not sure I'm crazy about that introduction. You know, you say, this is the kind of guy I am. I'm going to get you to stand on a table and yell and scream and throw newspapers at you. But that was 52 years ago, by the way, so that's changed a lot. I am really excited about sharing this book with you because I was telling Mark earlier that, like you, I read a lot of books. And I read most of those books at an intellectual level. I read them because they're interesting, and I absorb the information. I even make notes sometime, and I can quote passages from the book. But the books never get inside me. The books don't change my behavior, even though I understand the content. This book by David Brooks got inside me. It changed my behavior. And it got me to practicing some things that I needed personally to practice. And I suspect that all of us need, and I'm really pleased to be able to share it with you tonight. And I hope by the end I'll kind of motivate you to seek out this book and pick it up, because it's got something for all of us. So I want to start out by doing something different. I'm going to ask you to have a quick discussion here in about 2 or 3 minutes. Here's the question. I want you to think about a time when you were with a person who made you feel seen, who made you feel alive, somebody who really lit you up, somebody who made you feel in harmony with that person, like the two of you were really in sync, that this person really understood you. Maybe you said to yourself, this person knows me. Yeah, I've just known them for a short period of time, but they know me, they get me. Maybe you even said to yourself something like, I like me better when I'm with you. Now, that sounds a lot like being in love. I know that, okay? That sounds like, and you might immediately go to somebody you are in love with or were in love with. But I want to challenge you to get off of that person and try to think of somebody that doesn't fit that category, that maybe you've met recently, that you felt that kind of synchronicity with. And we'll talk about why that is. And just share that with anybody at the table. Now, I also want to say, if you can't think of anybody, don't be concerned about that, because that's part of the point of the question. Okay? And part of the point of the question is to maybe push people into saying, you know, I can't think of anybody that I've had that kind of relationship with recently. So don't feel bad if you can't think of anybody, but if something does come up, share it with the group, okay? Why don't you take 5 minutes and then I'll call you back together. Go. The challenge of this question is a lot of us cannot think of a person who's made us feel that way. The author Arthur Brooks, not David Brooks, but Arthur Brooks, has a phrase, he calls it deal friends versus real friends. We have a lot of deal friends. These are people that are transactional. We make contacts and we call them connections. But they're not connections, they're contacts. Hi, how are you? What do you do? It's nice to meet you. Here's our business card, and that's it. And those are important. Those sometimes make the machinery of commerce run, and business works that way. But we don't have enough real friends. How many friends do you have that you could call up and ask them to watch your dog while you went on vacation? or your friends you know would come take care of you when you were in the hospital, or do something that would inconvenience them to take care of you. And that's what this book is all about, is how to know a person. And if we would go to the next slide, there it is. So the book is divided into actually 3 sections. I want to talk about briefly tonight. The part 1 is about I see you. Have you ever heard anybody say, I feel invisible? I felt invisible a lot. Yeah, and I know you have too. In today's world, it's easy to feel invisible, that nobody sees us. Nobody knows who I really am. So he points out that this is an everyday skill. This is not something we have to wait for. How many of you are familiar with the play Waiting for Godot? Right? Waiting for Godot is a great play. It's a very simple play, written back in the 1940s, I think. It's a very simple, bare stage, leafless tree in the middle of the stage. Two guys standing around this tree. Their names are Vladimir and Erdogan. And Vladimir and Erdogan are waiting for Godot. They don't know who Godot is. They don't know why Godot is coming. They just know they're supposed to wait for Godot. And at the end of the day, a messenger shows up and says, Godot's not coming today, but he'll be here tomorrow. So they wait. Godot doesn't show up tomorrow. And they wait, and they wait, and they wait. And the point of that play is that a lot of us are waiting for our own personal Godot to show up. We're waiting for somebody to come connect with us. We're waiting for somebody to make me happy, right? We're waiting for somebody to get acquainted with us, to solve our problems. We wait and we wait and we wait. But Godot is not coming. Godot is not coming. And we will wait until we're my age, 84, and Godot's still not going to show up unless we finally learn to take the initiative. If I want to make better connections with people, if I want to have more real friends and less deal friends, I've got to take the initiative to learn how to do that. How to get out of my comfort zone and reach out and make that connection with other people and overcome my fear. And we all have that fear. One of the stories in the book is he talks about taking a taxi cab somewhere, and he got in the taxi cab, and the cab driver was making just small talk, like some cab drivers do. So where are you from? What do you do for a living? Got any kids? That kind of stuff. He said that conversation was not going anywhere. Wasn't helping me learn anything about that person. I know the cab driver must have some interesting stories, but I wasn't getting any of them. So what he did was he said, so what made you happy today? Ask a simple question. He said, what made you happy today? And the cab driver said, well, today's my anniversary. And he started talking about his anniversary and how long he's been married and about his wife. And he just lit up. He just loved talking about that. And all of a sudden that conversation went boom into a deeper level. And in a short cab ride, he got to know that cab driver. And the fact is, those stories are all over the place. They're in this room right now. This very moment, every person in this room has a story that's so powerful that if you were willing to do it, you could stand up in front of a group of 1,000 people and tell that story and probably get a standing ovation. Because you've overcome some obstacles, you went through some trials and tribulations, you've learned some things in your life that could help other people. All we have to do is have the courage to tell it. And I taught a class about this last week at a place called Oasis, and one woman's response to that story about what makes you happy, she said, oh my gosh, I could never do that. I could never do that. I said, well, why not? What's so hard about asking somebody what made you happy today? She said, well, I would just feel awkward doing it. And so she's still waiting for Godot. She's still waiting for somebody to come ask her that question, where all she has to do is just break through that barrier. So the first part of the book is about I see you. Now, and then part two is about I see you in your struggles. And we all have had struggles. How many of you are familiar with The Hero's Journey by Joseph Campbell? Oh my God, okay. Wow, what a great opportunity for you readers. Look it up, read The Hero's Journey, because we're all on a hero's journey in here, we just don't know it. You know, Joseph Campbell identified what he called the monomyth, that he researched all the myths in history, and he saw that there was an underlying pattern in all the myths. that described all of our lives. And even the movies today are built around the hero's journey. How many saw Star Wars? No? Nobody in here saw Star Wars? Oh my God. Okay. Well, Star Wars is a way to understand what the hero's journey is all about. Because the first step of the hero's journey is the hero, quote, hero, here's the call to adventure. You've heard a call to adventure in your life. I know you have. You may be hearing it right now. That little voice that says, you need to do this. Oh, I wish I could do this. This would be great. I heard the call to adventure 2 or 3 years ago to walk the Camino. That little idea came into my mind. That would really be cool. Well, the second step in the hero's journey is the hero always refuses the call. And so I did that for 2 or 3 years. No, I can't do that. I don't have the money. I don't have the time. That would be ridiculous. Why should I do that? And then finally, one day, my friend Chip Conley posed a question to me. He said, 10 years from now, and I'll ask you this question to answer privately, 10 years from now, what will you regret if you don't do it now? 10 years from now, what will you regret if you don't do it now? Well, I thought about that and I said, my goodness, 10 years from now, I'm going to be 94. I might not even be here. I don't know for sure. I'm already pushing the limits. My ticket's been punched. I'm already overstayed my welcome, but I'm not arguing about that. But if I am still here at 94, I won't be able to walk the Camino. That'll be out of the question. So if I'm going to do it, I need to do it now. So the quote hero then, what he says, crosses the threshold. They leave his or her known world. The world you live in and I live in right now, we're familiar with. We know all the routes, how to get home, everything. We know what to predict. Everything's the same over and over and over and over again. Not too many surprises. But we leave that world and we step into the unknown world, the strange world. For me, when I walked the Camino, I remember distinctly stepping off the airplane in Madrid. When I got on the airplane here in San Antonio, I was still in my familiar world. I've been in the airport before. I flew to Chicago. I've been in the Chicago airport before. That was familiar. I got on another plane. That was familiar. I've done that before. When I landed in Madrid, and I stepped off that plane onto that ramp into the Madrid airport, I walked into an unknown world. If you've ever been in the Madrid airport, it's otherworldly. It's got these fancy ceilings. I didn't speak the language. I didn't know where the exit was. I didn't know how to get to the cabs. I didn't know anything. That's walking into the unknown world. And part of the hero's journey is we'll find helpers along the way and mentors along the way. You remember, if you saw Star Wars, remember Obi-Wan Kenobi? Obi-Wan Kenobi was the mentor. He helped Luke Skywalker leave his familiar world, leave his home. He didn't want to do it, and he helped him along the way. And the hero's journey maps out the trials and tribulations that we go through along the way. Once again, I know if I could get you to tell your stories, you have been through some trials and tribulations in your life that would just be awesome for people if you would tell that story. You've had pain and heartache and failures in your life, and you've learned from them. And like me, you've gone through what Joseph Campbell called the dark night of the soul. We've all been through the dark night of the soul. For me, it was in my 60s when I lost my business, and I remember distinctly, and I'm telling you this story to try to prod your memory. I'm not going to ask you to tell your story, but I want you to think about it. I was sitting in my office, and the receptionist came in, and she stood at the door, and she was a little bit nervous. And she said, Mr. Whitty, there's a man in the lobby in a uniform asking for you. Okay. And I got up, went out in the lobby, and there was a sheriff. He had a subpoena. My wife was suing me for divorce, and I was being served a subpoena. It was a bad day. It was a bad day. It was a good day now. I didn't realize it then, but she was doing me a big favor. But it was. But that was my dark night of the soul that lasted for a couple of years because I didn't know what I needed to know at that time. And then somebody again told me, this is why it's so important to learn and to be with people and to have conversations. Somebody once said, when things go wrong in our life, we ask ourselves the wrong questions. Sometimes we ask, what's wrong with me? Boy, that was a question I was asking. What's wrong with me? And then, of course, there's what's wrong with you. And there's what's wrong with the world. But the question that I needed to ask myself was, what do I need to learn? What do I need to learn? And that's a question that we all can ask ourselves regardless of what life throws at us. If we can learn to see that as a lesson that life has given us, and life is asking something of us when that happens. And so I was able to turn this around, and I'm living my best life now at 84. I really am. But if you'd have told me that when I was in my mid-60s that was going to happen, I would say, you're crazy. I don't even know if I'm going to make it to tomorrow. I mean, I was really in bad shape. Well, you've been there too. We've all been there. We've all been there. I doubt any of you in this room have had a nice, steady, uphill ride with no bumps along the way, have you? And all of those lessons have such power to help other people if you would just tell them. Just talk about them or write about them. So we're going to talk about part 3. I see you with your strengths. Learn how to see people's strengths. Some ways to do that. And then try to wrap it all up, I hope, with some takeaways along the way. So if we can look at the next chart. Now, David Brooks, first of all, is a New York Times best-selling author. He's a PBS NewsHour commentator. If you've ever seen him or listened to him, he's brilliant. He's very articulate. His earlier books include The Road to Character and The Second Mountain. If those aren't on your reading list, I would highly recommend you read those books. They're really powerful books. And in this book, he writes very candidly about moving from a reserved, guarded upbringing toward a more open way of being. So the book was published in 2023. It became a New York Times bestseller. And he calls deeply seeing another person a craft. This is something that can be learned. This is really encouraging to me because I've never been good at this. This is why I'm interested in it. You know, they say we teach what we need the most. I've never been really good at this all my life. So this appeals to me. And to know that I can learn it is encouraging. It doesn't depend on personality or charisma or anything else. It just has to start with my intent that I want to connect with another person. Has a lot of personal stories. Now, I want to break a rule of presentations here. I want to share part of the book with you. It's a very short piece. This is in the first page of the book. This book is beaten up because I took it on the Camino with me. When I read this first paragraph, I thought this book is for me. He's describing me. So bear with me while I just share what he wrote. He said, the culture of my upbringing could be summed up by the phrase, think Yiddish, act British. Well, that doesn't apply to me, but he said, we were reserved, stiff upper lip types. I'm not saying I had a bad childhood. Far from it. Home was a stimulating place for me. Over our Thanksgiving dinner tables, we talked about the history of Victorian funerary monuments and the evolutionary sources of lactose intolerance. In parentheses, he says, I'm not kidding. Okay. And this was the one that kind of touched me. He said, there was love in the home. We just didn't express it. We just didn't express it. He said, perhaps unsurprisingly, I became a bit detached. When I was 4, my nursery school teacher apparently told my parents, David doesn't always play with the other children. A lot of the time, he stands off to the side and observes them. I thought, wow, man, that's me. Come on, how did you know that? Whether it was nature or nurture, a certain aloofness became part of my personality. By high school, I had taken up long-term residency inside my own head. I love to live inside my head, don't you? It's a great place. It's fascinating in there. I spend way too much time in it, though. I felt most alive when I was engaged in the solitary business of writing. Junior year, I wanted to date a woman named Bernice. But after doing some intel gathering, I discovered she wanted to go out with another guy. I was shocked. I remember telling myself, what is she thinking? I write way better than that guy. Yeah. I said, wow. I've been close to that, you know. And so he said it's quite possible that I had a somewhat constrained view of how social life worked for most people. So that launches the book, and he's writing from his own experience. So if we can look at the next slide, please. So we all know this. We're living through a crisis of disconnection right now. Our culture is broken. Matter of fact, when I was on the Camino, somebody said those very words to me. People locally from Spain would say, where are you from? I'd say, I'm from the U.S. Every single one of them had an unpleasant view of the U.S. Nobody was rude to me. Nobody was ever rude to me. They had nothing to say nice about the U.S. They knew exactly what was going on in our culture. But one man said very specifically, he said, your country is broken. Your country is broken. How can you disagree with that? Because half this country hates the other half. It's not a matter of just disagreeing with each other anymore. It used to be we just disagreed, but now it's pure hatred. And the one half calls the other half evil, and we're avoiding each other. We don't talk to each other. We don't connect with each other. I had a coffee date, and by the way, it's one of the things I'm doing to practice this book. Whenever I meet interesting people and we end the conversation and we say, hey, we should have coffee sometime. Does that happen to you? Yeah. And we say, that's great, that's a good idea. And I usually just leave and I never follow up on it. Recently I've been practicing, that's a good idea, let's nail it down now. When do you want to have coffee? And we make the date. And just a couple of days ago, I had a coffee date with a death doula. Have you ever heard of a death doula? I'd never heard of a death doula. This was the genuine death doula. And of course, that was my first question. I said, what is a death doula? And what she does is she sits with people who are dying and comforts them. And I said, well, you mean people hire you to do that? I said, yeah. Why doesn't the family do that? She said, well, because they don't want to. And she says, a lot of these people tell me that they haven't been touched in a long time. And even people they love and members of their family don't want to sit on the couch next to them. It's almost as if they think cancer or a death diagnosis is contagious. I thought that was so sad. It was a radical example of the disconnect that we see in our culture that's reached right into the intimate connections in our family. And my goodness, how many of us have the ability and the power just to reach out and touch somebody? You know, it doesn't take a lot. But like that woman in my class said, oh, I would feel so awkward doing that. Well, okay, then you'll never do it. So let's go to the next slide, if you will. He sorts people into two groups. One group he calls diminishers. Diminishers are people who sort people into categories instead of looking closer. We just size them up by their appearance, their sex, their race, their political affiliation or whatever. Boom, you're in that box. That's it. They are so focused on being seen themselves that they stop seeing others. And they leave people feeling small, generic, or invisible. I don't want you to share any names or stories about this, but how many people know people who might fit in that category? Now then, he also puts people in the category of illuminators. I like that term. Illuminators are people who light other people up. The illuminators bring trained, persistent curiosity to other people. And just think about that for a minute. Trained, persistent curiosity. How often do we look at other people and we see that person and say, there's a whole world in there. My gosh, there's a world of learning and experiences and knowledge and wisdom. There's a university of ideas in there. Why in the world would I just want to put you over in this category and move on to something I'm already familiar with? The illuminators know that's in there, and the illuminators work at trying to get in there and trying to bring that out. You've experienced illuminators in your life, haven't you? We all have. Those are the people who make us feel seen and known. This is what makes us feel like being in love. Now, just maybe. Now, tolerate this wild, crazy idea. Maybe we can be in love without having to get married or get in bed with somebody. Okay. All right. Maybe I could be in love with you without it going anywhere beyond this relationship. But yet that's a loaded term. But I'll bet you know some people right now that if you were allowed to say it, you could say, I'm in love with that person. I was in Baja, Mexico last year at a retreat, and there was a group of 6 people out on the patio, and it was in the evening. They were there for a private retreat. I went out and started having a conversation, and the head of the group, her name was Donna McLean. She was one of those illuminators. She was a person I immediately connected with. Just felt so comfortable with her. She made me feel so good about myself that I just wanted to talk to her more. So we've had a couple of Zoom calls, and I've connected with her on Zoom. And every time I connect with her, I just walk away feeling a little bit bigger and more important, because she tells me things about myself that I didn't even know. She sees things in me that I don't even see in myself. And I'm in love with that woman. I mean, I really am. I don't mind saying it. And as a matter of fact, we say that as kind of a ritual at the end of the conversation in a totally innocent way. I love you. And she says it back to me, I love you too. And we know exactly what that means. But we have this connection. I don't have enough of those connections in my life. I don't know about you, but I want more of them. And this book is helping me learn how to do that. Illuminators know what to look for and what questions to ask. And they leave people feeling bigger, respected, and lit up. So real quickly, just about 2 minutes, I'd like you to have another quick discussion. Tell the group a story about one illuminator in your life. And once again, if you can't think of one, Don't be upset. That's part of the question, okay? But you probably have one. You're just not aware of it. Take 2 minutes and see if you can talk about one person. Who is that person? You don't have to mention their name if you don't want to. But specifically, what does that person do? What does that person do to make you feel lit up? All right? Go to work. Now, those are great stories. I wish we had time to hear from everybody on those, because we all have illuminators in our life, and we all are illuminators in our own way. Because one of the points he makes is this is not putting people in a box. We kind of alternate back and forth between those two modes. Sometimes we are diminishers, and we don't realize it. I was at Rotary meeting a couple of weeks ago, and a gentleman sitting next to me heard that I walked a Camino, and he was very interested. He wanted to know all about it. So I was telling my Camino stories, and there was a guy sitting right across the table from me. He was just looking at me with a blank face. He showed no indication that he was even alive. He showed no smiles, no recognition of what I was saying. I didn't even know if he was listening to me or not. It kind of freaked me out, you know? And I got upset about it, internally upset, which is really weird. I shouldn't be upset, but I did. But he was a diminisher. He was probably an illuminator with some people in his life. So it's not a matter of that we're locked into one of these boxes. We move in and out of it. Now, I want to give you a one skill that you can practice right now, and I'm going to ask you to practice it, and you're probably not going to like me for it, but I'm going to do it anyway. That got your attention, didn't it? Remember these words: notice and name. Notice and name. What that means is pay attention to other people. Get your mind off yourself. Quit thinking about what clever thing you're going to say next. Quit thinking about the debate points you're going to bring up. Quit thinking about how you're going to rebut what that other person said. How you're going to subtly convince them that they're wrong and make yourself right. Quit thinking about all that stuff and focus intensely on the other person. What do I like about this person? What strengths, qualities do I see in this person that are noble and worthwhile? What am I noticing about this person? Just last night, we had a Generations Over dinner meeting at the Franklin Manor retirement home. It had 40 people there. My colleague Sarah, she's probably on Zoom now, so I'm probably going to make her uncomfortable. She's not going to like it that I'm going to tell this story about her, but I'm going to tell it anyway. Halfway through the dinner, a woman showed up late. Well, we can't seat people at a dinner that's already in progress, so we have the awkward, uncomfortable challenge of telling somebody you can't be in the meeting. Well, then she started to tell us that she was late because she took the bus to get there. And there were tornado alerts out there last night, you know. So she had taken the bus. And so then we started asking her about how she was going to get back home. And she said, well, I'm going to have to catch the bus to get back home. Well, as soon as I heard that, my mind started thinking, oh my, you know, this is not good. How can we help her? But Sarah noticed quickly, and Sarah said, let me fix you a plate, and we'll go back and find a table, and we'll have dinner together. Then she fixed a plate. She went back and sat with that person for 30 minutes and had a conversation. And that's what one author has called moral beauty. Moral beauty is when we see people doing things that aren't in their own best interest at the moment. They have to give up something, because Sarah had other things to do, but she sacrificed something that she needed to do to make this woman feel comfortable. That's moral beauty. So that's what she noticed. And
how'd she get home? Did she still take
she still had to take the bus. Yeah, she still had to take
her home?
Well, not that I know of, but that would have been probably a good next step, yeah. But the fact that she took a bus was admirable. So I noticed this. A lot of times people might not take the step to name it. So what I did, at an appropriate time, I went up to Sarah and I said, you know, I noticed that when she said she was going to take the bus home, you immediately offered to fix her a plate, and you took her back there and you had dinner with her. I thought that was a really beautiful thing to do, and I want to compliment you on it. I was really impressed by it. See, I just took the time to state what I noticed about somebody. So what I want to ask you to do right now, and not everybody's going to be able to do this, so if you can't do this, don't worry about it. This is not an assignment, but you've had a chance to interact with some of the people at your table. I want to challenge you to turn to somebody at your table and just look at them and say, you know, one of the things I noticed about you, and what is it that you admire or like about that person? What quality do you see in that person? What is good and admirable about that person? It could be as simple as, one of the things I notice about you is you have a great smile when you're talking. You're a delight to listen to. And one of the things I noticed about you is you really told a great story. I appreciate that. One of the things I noticed about you is I watched how you listen to the other people when they're talking. That's really a great thing. That's a marvelous skill you have. So I want to challenge you to see if you can do that. If you can't do it or you don't want to do it, that's fine. But see how many people you can give that kind of feedback to in about 3 minutes, okay? Go. Give her a try. All right, so here's what I want to point out. The skill of paying attention, getting outside of ourselves. I noticed a whole different level of energy in the room just now than we had before. A whole different level of energy. I saw people around the tables lighting up. And that's what happens when somebody says an equivalent of, you know, one of the things I admire about you, one of the things I appreciate about you, let me tell you something I see in you that's just wonderful. And when we hear those things, it just lights us up. And we have those opportunities every single day to do that. I was in the H-E-B supermarket last week in the checkout line. I normally don't do anything in the checkout line. I'm into my own head in the checkout line. So the checker was doing her job. She wasn't unpleasant by any means. She was just very efficient. She was working. She wasn't interacting with anybody like the checkers normally do. But I noticed she had this beautiful tattoo on her arm. And by the way, these days, tattoos are a great way to start conversations. Well, trust me, they are killer ways to start conversations. Because I looked at the tattoo and I simply said to her, I said, that's really a beautiful tattoo on your arm. I'll bet there's a story behind that. Oh my God, she started talking. We've got her whole family history. It was amazing, and she just lit up. Simply because I asked a question, like your point was so well made back there. Just ask a question, and everybody has a story that they're dying to tell, but they don't think anybody's interested. So trust me, everywhere you go these days you see tattoos, and none of these tattoos were done randomly. They were all done as symbols of something in that person's life. And there's a story behind every one of those tattoos. So just try that sometime. Wow, that's a beautiful tattoo. I bet there's a story behind that. Boom. Yeah, so try that sometime. So I can get the next slide up real quickly, because we're going to move through these real quick because we're running out of time. I really like this comment in the book where he says, I've come to believe that the quality of our lives and the health of our society depends to a large degree on how well we treat each other in the minute interactions of life. Not those big events. Hey, if you win the lottery, people are probably going to come say really nice things to you. But when you look at those little moments of moral beauty that you see every day, notice those things, name them, take the risk to point it out. It makes all the difference in the world. Can you go to the next slide, please? So the core skill here, what we're talking about is paying attention, getting outside of our own head and being present. He calls it accompaniment, showing up consistently for someone, especially through the long, unglamorous middle of those hard moments, and receiving, not performing. You know, if you really look at yourself in conversation, many of us will find that we spend a lot of time performing. We're trying to impress people. I want you to like me. I want you to like me. So I'm going to try hard to say what I think you want me to say, or say it the way. If we can get out of that and be present, then we open up a whole new world of people. Next slide, please. So the conversation is a craft. Conversation is something that can be learned. It does not depend on your personality or your charisma or your good looks or your education or anything else. It depends more on being genuinely interested in other people. That's what Dale Carnegie said. He said, we can make more friends in 2 hours by becoming genuinely interested in other people than we can in 2 years by trying to get them interested in us. And it's not that hard to be interested in other people, because there are all these different worlds out there and universes in operation and all these lessons that surround us. Now, I don't have time for this, but you might think about, what's a question someone has asked you that always seems to open people up? I told you about the example in the book about what made you happy today. Try that question. That's an easy one to ask. You'd be surprised how it will open people up. I'll bet there's a story behind that tattoo. Can I touch it? Yeah, that will open people up. And there's a lot of questions like that if we start thinking about, do I want to open people up? Do I want to make a connection, or am I happy being disconnected from people? And that's a decision we all have the right to make. We might say, I don't want to connect with other people. I'm not interested. That's fine. But what I'm talking about here are people who are suffering from this loneliness epidemic that is rampant in our society, and much of that is self-imposed. People have withdrawn into their own world, and they're no longer reaching out to other people to try to make connections, which is unfortunate. So we go to the next slide, please. In part 2, I see you in your struggles. I'm going to go through this one real quick. A lot of us instinctively want to cheer people up when they're having problems, right? I know I've experienced that. You're suffering, you've had an illness or a tragedy in your life, and I feel compelled to say something. I need to solve your problem. That's not what needs to be done. What they want is just sit with them. Just to be there. Just to be there. We go to the next slide. And this is fascinating. There's a classic still face experiment that are documented where a caregiver suddenly stops responding to a baby's expressions. And the baby becomes visibly distressed within seconds when they're not getting that feedback from the caregiver. Wow, I never realize that. And so he makes the point that same need for a responsive face never goes away. We just get better at hiding how much it matters. We still view it as a threat. Back to my story about the man at the Rotary with the blank face. He was not giving me any response to the story. I viewed that as a threat. I felt uncomfortable and kind of angry about it. So, you know, the way we respond to people. And I want to give you another little tip. Have you ever heard of a Duchenne smile? Anybody heard of a Duchenne smile? Well, if you just write this down, because this will impress people. Not many people have heard of Duchenne smile. A Duchenne smile was named after a French researcher named Duchenne, who actually did research on smiles. And by the way, you have a Duchenne smile. Okay, and I'll tell you what that is in a minute. A Duchenne smile is the difference between a fake smile that's only from here, that we all do. A Duchenne smile is in the eyes. A Duchenne smile causes little crow's feet wrinkles here in the eyes, and we can sense it. We can just feel the difference between a fake smile and a Duchenne smile. Sometimes we see Duchenne smiles just with strangers, maybe in the supermarket. We'll walk by and somebody sees us and they'll give us a smile, and we feel that sincerity, we feel that warmth. And sometimes we get nothing at all. But don't go home and practice in the mirror. Because you can't do this, but it has to come from within. But when you feel it, when you feel that love, then it happens. And then another quick tip I'd like to give you that I've learned for myself, and I hope it might help you. I met a man about 8 years ago in my first experience at the Modern Elder Academy in Baja, Mexico. I thought he was the craziest person I'd ever met in my life, because he called himself the I love you man. He said, my goal in life is to get every one of the 7 billion people on the planet to start every conversation with I love you. And I thought, that's the most absurd thing I've ever heard in my life. I thought he was just really weird, and I tried to avoid him. He was one of 16 people in our retreat. And I watched him meet people the first night, going around, hi, how are you, I love you. What is wrong with this guy? And after a couple of days, I noticed the people in the workshop were catching on, and they were also saying, I love you. It was usually at the end of the conversation or at the end of the day when we'd leave, they'd say, we'll see you tomorrow, I love you. This is kind of nice. At the end of the week, I said, Joshua, you were the last person in this meeting I thought I would ever learn anything from. And I will never be able to do what you're doing, to start every conversation with I love you. I just won't be able to do that. But what I have learned, and this is so important to me, I've learned that if I think it, it makes all the difference in the world. If I go into one of these networking meetings or whatever you want to call them, instead of walking up to somebody and getting into my analytical frame of mind and being threatened by you or criticizing you or that kind of thing, if I just think, I love you, and I want you to be happy, I want you to be safe, I want you to be well. It short circuits that negative thinking, totally short circuits it. And I can concentrate, I can focus on that person, I can listen, and I can give more Duchenne smiles, okay? It just really works. So give that a try. Quickly, I'm going to pass this one by because that's, and let's go right on because I want to get to all the way down. All right, 5 habits to try this week. This is easy. What I'd like to challenge you to do is maybe just for this week, not the rest of your life. I would predict that if you do it for a week, you will do it for the rest of your life. Ask one more follow-up question that feels natural. Just ask an additional question. Get curious and ask that question. Notice the moment you start explaining instead of listening. Boy, that's a hard one. I want to explain everything. I'm a great explainer. I love to explain. And I can quickly see the eyes start glazing over. But notice that. Notice when you're in that mode. Name what you observe in someone gently. That's that. Notice and name it. You seem to be really happy. Tell me, what is it that you're so happy about? Show up again tomorrow, not just today, but for somebody struggling. I rarely have people follow up to see how I'm doing. They know. You know, I'm scheduled for surgery on Friday. I just booked it today. And I'm wondering, when I announce this to people, I wonder how many people who are going to follow up and say, how you doing? You know, I heard you were having surgery. What's going on? I don't know. But I know that I will appreciate whoever does contact me. But most of us are just so busy in our own lives these days, we don't do that. And ask a friend about a turning point in their life story. I wish we had time for that tonight, but if we had time to go around the table, every one of you at the table could tell a story about that turning point. Your hero's journey, when you survived your dark night of the soul. And in Star Wars, it was when they were in the garbage chute and the walls were closing in on them. They came out of that with lessons learned, and they returned home with what Joseph Campbell called boons for their people. And that's the key to me. Everybody in this room has survived your own dark night of the soul. You've learned lessons, and those lessons could be powerful lessons for other people if you would share them, either at conversation or in writing or in many different ways. Okay, next slide. So please just remember these three things, that seeing people well is a craft. It's more on intention than innate talent or ability. And most pain that other people are feeling calls for presence, not solutions. And to know someone deeply means to know their story. So ask them about their story. And finally, I think our last slide is coming up, should be. So, you all have been a really great group. I've actually seen some Duchesne smiles out there. That's pretty cool. Okay. I thank you for being here and being such a good group, and thank you for coming out on a night like this. It's really impressive. So thank you very much.